think about this a lot. Why have I been able to have a career writing crime stories? Why is there such an interest? Why do you have such a successful career publishing crime books, selling crime books? Why are people so interested? And I think it's cases like that that don't have resolution that so much whet the appetite for people for stories that do two things. One, that create context, so that we can begin to understand these horrific things in some context that makes sense for us. And two, that have resolution. And so often in real life, there's no resolution. And crime fiction answers those needs.
It really does. But I've decided I think at the Left Coast Crime Conference in Bristol, England, that I'm just back from, was trying to come up with why readers attach to certain kinds of genre fiction and what word sort of applies to that. And I've forgotten some of it, but I think one, like adventure stories, these are people who really like, let's say, adrenaline, like the rush. And I was sitting there realizing that my motivating force in a lifetime of reading crime fiction has been curiosity. The reason it works so well for me is that it's a wonder, and you've done it exceptionally well, I think, is it's a wonderful way to convey information to readers, scholars like me, because I am basically a scholar, people who just like to know stuff, in a way that isn't work, it's kind of like sugarcoating, the pill or whatever it is, but I've learned a lot about the practice of psychotherapy from you that I probably never would have gone out and tried to learn in some other nonfiction context. But you just take it in through the pores when you're reading crime fiction.
As a storyteller, not as a writer, I look at it as a journey. And I'm going to be taking the reader on a journey that I hope is going to be diverting, entertaining, interesting. The things that I can put outside the window of the train car or the boat or whatever vehicle the journey is in are all things that person can learn. And some readers are much more curious about it than others. And some of them couldn't tell you any of the details of it when it's over. But it's outside the window for anybody who wants to read it. And to me, that's all gravy. It's wonderful when someone pays attention, because much of that stuff that's outside the window is what has interested me to write it. It's those things that are fascinating enough to keep me consumed and keep me committed to a project for the long time it takes me to put it on paper.
Well, I agree with you about context and resolution. I also agree with, I can't remember if it was Carl Hyacin or who it was that said it, that reading crime is a way to face our alligators.
I think it's very much the way to face our alligators. And, for someone who's curious like yourself, if you got to the end of a book and there was no resolution, or if it ended in real life with a hung jury or with something that didn't feel right, it's just not something that readers are going to keep going back for. And I think one of the things the genre provides is, by and large, it adheres to the ancient philosophy that a story has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end.
The three-act drama?
Not necessarily in that order, but it has to have them. And I think crime fiction, by and large, provides it.
I think it does, too. And every once in a while, you get a really unsettling book like Scott Turow's Presumed Innocent, in which I still hear people debating who did it. I find it fascinating because I think it's perfectly clear, but that a lot of people just don't want to accept that ending, or didn't read the book carefully enough, or he set it up in such a way that it can, baffle them as well as whatever. But you do every once in a while get a landmark book like that, I think, that, its very lack of resolution in a way can hook people in.
I think maybe the exception proves the rule.
Yeah.
I think readers read for different things, and there's resolution there if you want it.
That's right.
I went back and read that book about 5 years ago, and the ending seemed vaguer to me on the second reading than it did the first. There is a small aside, for instance, in the end of this book that about half the readers I've talked to have missed it. And it's not crucial to the actual ending, but in terms of the resolution for a couple of characters, it's crucial. And I think some readers just, their psyches do not want to see it, and it's fine.
You know, it may be that, and I will also say, and this is something I think people who don't read do not get, is that people who read need different books for different moments. And a lot of what you get out of a book depends on the energy level and everything you had on the day you read it. And, you know, not many people read books more than once. So most of us get a one-shot take. And if you mismatch the book to your energy level or your mood or whatever it is, you can have a bad experience or a nothing experience with a book than if you'd read it on a different day, in a different mood. So sometimes I think things like that maybe people miss. It may have just been it was an off day.
Or,
you never know.
Or they are staying up too late in order to finish the book, and they're tired or rushing or
That
whatever.
too.
There's lots of variables that
I
go
was
into it.
taking, I can't remember, some kind of heavy-duty pain pill for something not too long ago, and I realized when I went to write our newsletter that there were like 4 books that I had read while drugged out, and I really don't, I mean, they were incoherent in my mind, you know. I had thought I was reading them, but obviously I had not, so there we are. How much has Lauren's disease determined their whole relationship?
I've tried not to let it be a major determining factor. I've tried to make it as realistic as I could for her. They've had to accommodate to it,
Right.
but I think their relationship from the outside does not look that different from that of their friends. I've also tried to give the sense that from the inside, from the way they experience it, in a more intimate way, that they both had to make tremendous adjustments to it. So, you know, it's one of the blessings that comes along with the series is I get the time to be able to explore that sort of thing. And I think readers have been patient in terms of letting the characters develop at a pace that makes those types of evolutions feel natural, rather than try and, you know, force them into a single story or a relatively small number of pages.
So most of the books, the backstory, the continuing story of the characters, their interactions, their personal life runs through, but you've actually written a couple of books in which that hasn't happened.
Where there's very little backstory continuing, and where the typical series protagonists take strongly secondary roles. In most of the books, the narrator is Alan Gregory, the Boulder psychologist. In about a third of the books, he's not narrator. And in almost all of those books, he's a secondary character. This is one of those. Kill Me is a book that he is there just as a therapist to the protagonist who actually narrates the story. So it's, you know, we talk about things that keep the series fresh, that keep me interested. This is one of those stories that was just so compelling that I felt a need to write it, and I found a way to write it that made it feel to me like a non-series book.
So Alan actually doesn't need to be in this book.
This book could absolutely be written without Alan. There would need to be someone in Alan's role as confidant.
Right.
But the confidant does not need to be a therapist, and certainly didn't need to be in Boulder. Much of the book does take place outside of Boulder, and there's some of it that's personal to Alan because he's in it, but no, this is not a book that advances the series' backstory at all, advances Alan's backstory at all, or requires his presence.
So why is he there?
That's as much a publishing decision as a literary one. You know, like I said, the book required a confidant, and going into the decision to publish this with my publisher, the question was, who's that confidant going to be? And I wasn't committed to it being Alan, but my publisher, because of their commitment to the series, felt that it was their clear preference that confidant be Alan, even if it was in a smaller role.
Well, and as a publisher, I can certainly understand their thinking. I certainly don't mean to imply that I think it damaged the book, but I myself thought when I was reading the book, you know, that it was neat, it was Alan, but it really could have been Joe or,
The benefit for me is for readers who are unfamiliar with the series, who might hesitate to pick up the book because they don't know the backstory. The book feels totally fresh, and they don't feel like they've missed anything. For readers who are attached to the series, they do get to see Alan and do get to see his involvement in this patient's life. So it works both ways. I get the advantages in some ways of a standalone and some of the advantages of having a continuing series book.